Oh, I am so pumped for this. Finally, I get to see Hamilton. Oh, I can just watch the trailer over and over again until Friday.
Jeremy, could you please?
I know. He's been doing this non-stop all week long.
You all are taking a very important moment away from me. I've never seen this. I'm so excited for it to premiere on Disney Plus. Right here in the room where it happens, I'm taking my shot. Did you know Alexander Hamilton met his wife here in Morristown?
We know!
Take a break, Godwin.
Wait for it. He'll have it out of his system by Monday.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Up to Speed. And yes, I am very excited for the premiere of Hamilton tomorrow on Disney Plus. Reminder, we are offering customers a year of Disney Plus on us, so that is great timing going into this holiday weekend here. And here's some other good news to get us started today. For new Fios customers, we're also offering up a year of Hulu on us. Sign up for Fios Gigabit Home Internet, and you'll get a year of Hulu with tons of movies, TV episodes, and original series available to stream on demand. Of course, you can visit Verizon.com to learn how to get Disney Plus and Hulu both on us. Let's get right to it today with a look back at the news from this week. Before we get to our conversation with retired General Stanley McChrystal, big week for us here at Verizon as we celebrated our 20th anniversary. We marked the milestone by opening the New York Stock Exchange on Tuesday. Nigel Weissy, a network technician of more than 20 years, and Raquel Wilson, a new member of the team, did the honors with a look back and a nod to the future of our next 20. And if you ever imagine what the next 2 decades will look like, well, our new series will highlight next-gen leaders, the changes they want to see in society, and wisdom from those who have blazed the trail. We'll be streaming the first edition next week. More details to come. And all of you make this one of the best places to work. I'm not just saying it. A lot of people say that. Over the coming weeks, we'll share why you choose Verizon. So excited to share those stories with the world. Starting today, undergrad, graduate, and postgraduate college students can get the best unlimited pricing in addition to 12 months on Disney Plus on us. Again, a good reason to watch Hamilton this weekend, and Apple Music included with select unlimited plans. To learn more, check eligibility, and to sign up, visit vzw.com/students. And did you happen to see this on GMA yesterday?
Because of what you guys are doing, and you're going to have to work with me here. But Ellen, they are donating $10,000. You got me there?
God,
Verizon is donating $10,000 to you guys.
Verizon donated 100 smartphones and $10,000 to the Visiting Nurse Association in New Jersey, who work directly in patients' home amid the pandemic. This will help nurses meet with patients virtually while continuing to provide care. And don't forget, nurses also get a nice discount from us on wireless and Fios. What a week, but that's not all. Recently, I had the chance to talk to retired General Stanley McChrystal about leadership and history, among many other things, as we go pretty in-depth in this conversation. Hope you enjoy it. Take a look. Joining me today, a very special guest, General Stanley McChrystal. A little bit about the General before we get into some questions and a chat on leadership. He is a retired 4-star General. He's the former commander of U.S. and International Security Assistant Forces, Afghanistan, and the former commander of the nation's premier military counterterrorism force, the Joint Special Operations Command. Now retired, like I said, also an author with a couple of books published, a few books published. So I'm going to talk to him more about that and really overall about leadership. General, thanks so much for joining us today. How are you?
I'm great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's good. So, Verizon, we've got over 130,000 employees around the world. About 10,000 of those are people who have served the military in one way or another. So a special thank you to them as we get this conversation going. Obviously, we've been in the pandemic now for some months, and then we're going through that. And then there's the racial injustice and the protests that are going on. Leadership at a time like this, how important is it, and how can we look for a good leader?
Yeah. Well, it's always important, Jeremy, but thanks for bringing up what's happening in the country right now socially. If we're recording this today on Juneteenth, which of course marks the day that another West Pointer, long before me, General Gordon Granger, took the Emancipation Proclamation and basically published it in Texas, telling slaves that they were now freed. Now, we know that progress has been sporadic up and down since then, but it's an important day for us to mark. And so I think leadership in society, what we want from leaders now is a commitment to values. We need competent people. We need people who have experience. But more than anything else, I think what we yearn for is character. Character that reflects what we can believe in.
Yeah. And I mean, when you've been in the positions that you've done, you've commanded troops about the same size as Verizon is. How did you make yourself a good leader, and how did you listen to folks about what you needed to do as a leader to be better for your people?
One of the things you learn when you get into a larger organization, if you find yourself at the higher ranks of it, is you need to go back to a certain level of simplicity more than you do when you're down close. And that's because you are communicating across an organization that's geographically spread. It is by definition diverse in gender, race, religion, but also diverse in what they do in the company. And so everybody is seeing Verizon and seeing larger parts of the world from a slightly different perspective. So the leader has got to set some very clear directional signals to the team, which means you can't be too confusing about it. You've got to say, these are the things which we hold as important values. Then from a business standpoint, this is the direction we as a business are growing. And this is what I want from you as team members to this team. And I think the leader has to exhibit those qualities and values that we want, but also has got to be, I like to say sometimes, relentless about hitting that message out. In the military, we talk about the rule of threes. And that says if you haven't said something 3 times, it's like it was never said. I really think it's 300.
Yeah, that holds true here to a corporation as well. I mean, we, as a communicator, those are things that we rely on, the rule of threes. So that's a great add. What else were you going to add there?
Well, just that you've got to set a course and then not change it constantly. You've obviously got to adjust it when conditions change, but give some consistency to the team, things that they can believe in and hold on to.
For leaders out there, people who are, not in a leadership position, it's okay to fail, right? And admit that failure, you would say.
Well, it's not only okay, it's inevitable unless you are perfect, and I don't know anyone who's perfect. But there are several nuances about this. I think the first thing about failure is you've got to admit it to yourself. And there's a temptation to sort of rationalize, was it my fault? Something else happened. And so you got to get over that. You got to look in the mirror and say, okay, I blew that one. Then I think you got to get in front of the team and be willing to say, I didn't get that right. Now, what I would say, though, is what the team doesn't want is they don't want you to grab your favorite teddy bear, get in the corner and sob and say, I made a mistake, and wait for somebody to come give you a hug. That's not what they're looking for in leaders. They're looking for leaders to say, okay, I got that wrong. Now, let me tell you what I learned from it, and let me tell you what we're going to do going forward, because that's what matters.
To you, what makes a great leader? Who has inspired you along the way, and who have you learned from?
It's funny. I've learned from a whole variety of leaders. As one of the best leaders I ever worked for me, and he was a regimental sergeant major when I was a regimental commander in the Rangers. And it was such that when he and I, a guy named Mike Hall, would go and visit our units, I would speak, and at the end of an exercise, and I would critique them or inspire them. And they would all listen, and they would nod, and they'd be very respectful. And then when Mike Hall would get up to speak, they would pull out notebooks to write down what he said. I said, oh, okay. But Mike was the kind of leader who could lead me. I was senior. We were close, but he could influence, and he could influence people at every level, not being bombastic or directive, but being influential. I also admit, quite honestly, that I learned from a person that we killed, a guy named Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the leader of al-Qaeda in Iraq. And there were a lot of things about him that I didn't respect. His tactics, he was a murderer in many ways. He was a psychopath. But he was also a very effective leader, and he was committed to his cause. And, but for the experience that I had growing up, if I'd had his set of experience, it's very possible I'd have ended up in the same place, the same perspectives and views as he did. So you have to be willing to be open-minded enough to learn from people that you may oppose or otherwise, not respect.
In your book, Leaders, Myth, and Reality, you profiled Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In that. What can we learn from Dr. King in the civil rights movement of the 60s and the movement of today?
I think we need to study Dr. King because as we get further from him, we tend to simplify his life. I was a boy and then I was 13 when he was killed, and I remember the morning when we got the word that Dr. King had been murdered in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee. But if we think about Dr. King, we tend to think of his rhetoric. We tend to think of, I have a dream. In 1963, he mesmerized a crowd when he broke from his planned speech and went into an I have a dream. But that's not Dr. King. In reality, he took over leadership of the Montgomery bus boycott in December of 1955 as a 26-year-old pastor with no leadership experience. He led that for 382 days, and then he became one of the leaders of the civil rights movement for 13 years. And he was a unifier. He was a roll-up-your-sleeves operative. He was a reformer inside his organization. He was a spokesperson for it. He raised money. He did all of these practical things that you'd want a good CEO of an organization to do, because he understood that all of those things were components of making this very diverse organization move forward. And so I think if we step back and say, you can't just be morally right, you can't just be well-spoken, sometimes you've got to do all those other aspects of leadership to bring something together and actually have it come out the way we want it to.
I believe there are so many things we can learn from Dr. King about how he operated and what he did, and I think we're seeing that even more so today as this movement continues, and that's something we've talked a lot about here at Verizon. Switching gears, you talked about commanding the forces. It's a big group of folks that you've had there in the military. And then looking at corporations, how do you inspire creativity for folks who may not be in the middle, may not be in the top, and are just kind of starting out their careers?
Yeah, you've got to enable it and demand it. If you think back to the industrial age, Frederick Winslow Taylor, as we had this drive for efficiency, there was this idea that you could use geniuses to design an organization and have it executed by idiots. So everybody would have their little part in the assembly line, and as long as they did what they were told, those geniuses would have it all pulled together into great products or great outcomes. That's clearly not what we need now. Now we've got a complex environment when things are changing. We need everybody's heads in it. So I think the first thing we have to do is share information like we never have before, starting with what is the organization trying to do. I was on the board of directors of JetBlue Airlines for many years, and it was great. We had a saying that said, we want to be America's favorite airline. So we want every decision made by every team member to go through that lens. What decision or action would I make that would make us the favorite airline of our customers? And it goes to safety, it goes to efficiency, it goes to everything. And I would say that as we go to inspire a team to be more creative, we've also got to say, we expect that. We want you to try things, which means you are going to fail. If your batting average is 1,000, you're not pushing hard enough. You're not trying things. But it means we as leaders have got to underwrite a certain amount of failure. And so we've got to say that if you're out there trying new and different things with imagination and good intentions, that's exactly what we will reward.
And, you're an active fella. You like to run a lot and keep yourself mentally fit, physically fit as well. How have you been doing it over the past few months? I mean, I think that's the other part of everyone in our current setups. How do you keep yourself strong here and here in the body?
Everybody's different, but I am a creature of routine and habit. So I do certain things every day. I have some bad habits, but I got some good ones. So,
we all do.
Yeah. I get up very early and I work out every day, even when I don't want to. And I work out hard because I know for the rest of the day, I'm going to feel good about it. I also do certain things. I joke about this. I make the bed as soon as I get up. as soon as my wife's out of bed as well. I fold my underwear in my drawers, and people laugh at that and go, "That's ridiculous. I learned it at West Point." But I found that if I stick to things that I've determined are good, in many ways it just makes me perform better. So I think that particularly in this environment where you don't have the discipline of getting dressed and going to work and having those forcing functions, now I think it's more important than ever that we get a routine, we get a set of habits, we get a discipline in our, I call it operating rhythm, so we don't start this sort of slow slide into not performing.
Yeah, those are, as much as the routines may not be liked, routines are there for a reason, I would say, and good advice to let your spouse out of the bed before you make it as well. So looking at where we are right now and what's in the future, where do we as a country, as a society, as a global society, where do we go from here? And what does history point to?
Yeah, I think you can be very alarmed or you can be very optimistic. And I sort of go day to day. The things that alarm me is in the last decade or so, we have this move away from globalization. We have a move toward hyper-nationalism in some countries. And we've seen that before, particularly in the 1930s. And that's concerning to me. We have a rise of populist leaders in a number of places. We've seen those before, and usually that is not the best leadership for government. So there are worries, but I think there are many more things that can pull us together. First is we have the ability to reach out more than ever before. There's no part of the world where we can't communicate with instantaneously, which means we can connect things, ideas, and people. And in good ways, we can bring elements together. If we think of COVID-19 as a terrible challenge, but also in many ways a unifying possibility for the planet, it's an outside challenge that we all are fighting against, and it ought to be a great vehicle to bring us together, to coordinate, to collaborate, and to help each other defeat it. Because you're really not going to defeat something like a pandemic unless you defeat it everywhere. And so I think if we are willing to leverage challenges like that, then what we do is we can move forward. And then finally, something you brought up earlier, we are going through a conversation in the United States, and it's starting around the world as well, that I think is overdue. And that is about justice, and that is about equality. And I don't think it's just race. I think it's going to go more broadly than that. I think it's going to, why doesn't everybody have an equal opportunity for whatever it is they want to do? No guarantee, as we say, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But the reality is, I think we are having a very difficult but necessary reflection that it's not. We haven't done it very well in many areas. And we need to fix some things, and it doesn't matter whether we individually are responsible. You know, if you say, I am not a racist or I am not unfair to people, it doesn't matter. We all have to be part of the solution, whether we think we were architects of the problem or not.
Yeah, we all do need to be part of the solution. As we're wrapping this up, any final thoughts or pieces of wisdom for our Verizon employees and everybody else who's watching today?
Sure. And first, thanks for having me on. This is a tough time. This is a crisis. But the reality is we're going to get through the crisis. People who are older like me know it. If this is your first crisis, welcome. The next one will be easier. But here is the thing to remember. What we do during this crisis is going to be something that we're going to have to look ourselves in the mirror about. We're going to look our grandchildren in the mirror. And we are going to say, did I conduct myself? Did I treat people the way I should have? Was I responsible? And if you expand the crisis beyond COVID to the economic crisis and whatnot, it's really an opportunity for us to rise and to be something we know we want to be. And I would tell everybody, use the opportunity to do that. Let's not feel sorry for ourselves. Let's all say, okay, this is a chance for me to be a bigger person, and coming out of this, I'm going to be very happy someday that I did.
Good words. General, thanks so much for joining me and for the thoughts on leadership and what history and how history will be told in the years and days to come. So thank you so much. Some of our teammates who are also veterans served under General McChrystal, and they tell me he is one of the best. So thank you again for that conversation. And a reminder, service members, veterans, and Gold Star families can get our best pricing on wireless and Fios. Just visit vzw.com/military to learn more. And finally today, this is the weekend here in the States that we celebrate the 4th of July and all the freedoms that mean so much to all of us. As Hans always reminds us, our health, safety, and well-being are paramount. So whatever you choose to do this weekend and however you choose to celebrate, make sure you do it safely, make sure you're wearing a mask, and you social distance. We'll be back with you Monday, and until next time, you're up to speed.